Woke Hollywood panics as Los Angeles becomes a production graveyard. From The Hollywood Reporter, why Los Angeles is becoming a production graveyard. As the number of movie and TV shoots approaches historic lows, insiders are lobbying for fewer restrictions to help bolster Hollywood's place in the city it calls home. It's been getting very bad in Hollywood. It's not economical to produce TV shows and films in Hollywood anymore. Check this out. From The Hollywood Reporter, Los Angeles film and TV production approaches historically low levels. And from the Los Angeles Times, Hollywood production falls below strike levels as reality TV takes massive hit. The strikes definitely didn't help any. From Screen Daily, Hollywood strike impact, quote, far more severe for the U.S. than people realize, says Sony Pictures boss. Hollywood has many problems. If they had stayed focused on producing the kind of things people wanted to see, they would have been in much better shape than they are today. For years, Gordon Ramsay and his hit MasterChef franchise called a converted soundstage in Los Angeles home. From there, contestants crisscrossed the 30-mile zone where Hollywood holds court to film on location at glitzy mansions and Michelin-starred restaurants. Michelin-starred restaurants are the best restaurants you can go to, usually pretty expensive. Tens of millions of dollars flowed into the economy across the Fox show's 14 seasons. Because when people work on a show, they don't just go and work on the show. They also use catering services, security services, transportation services. It goes on and on. When a show leaves production in Hollywood and moves out of Los Angeles, they don't just lose the show, they lose everything related to the show, all that local business. Now here comes Australia, which has been aggressively courting the production to relocate. It was a tempting proposition. The burgeoning film hub, unlike California, allows unscripted programming to receive tax credits to shoot there. Still, the math didn't make sense, at least not until permitting issues with MasterChef's LA soundstage emerged that would require major renovations. So starting next year, producers will fly dozens of home cooks and the troves of cash that come with a big budget network production to shoot in Australia. If you're not going to give tax credits because of regulations, if you're not going to allow people to just operate and utilize their existing sound stages so they don't have to do like major expensive renovations, of course people aren't going to do production there. Quote, it's distressing, says Paul Audley, president of the permitting film office, Film LA. Quote, we worked a lot to try to keep them here. The flight of production from LA started as a trickle. A television show relocating to Georgia here. A movie opting to film in the UK there. Now the migration border's on an exodus. Since the strikes ended last year, Hollywood has been holding its breath for a comeback worthy of the more flush days of power lunches at the Polo Lounge. A clearer picture is coming into focus that the rebound has yet to materialize. New data released by Film LA on October 16th shows that filming in LA is approaching historically low levels, with the 3-month period from June to September seeing the fewest number of shoot days this year. The figure even falls short of shooting in the region during the same time last year when the industry was halted by the work stoppage. What started as an expectation that Hollywood would rally after the strikes has become muted hope that things could get better within the next year. Production, alongside employment, is falling short of projections. Every category of filming for scripted content trails historical norms. Part of the downturn of filming in the city can be traced to the contraction from the era of so-called peak TV, when studios were viciously competing for subscribers to grow their streaming endeavors. But some data indicates that competing international film hubs are seeing flat or in some cases rising levels of production. Last quarter, the UK and Canada each saw more live-action scripted titles with budgets of at least $10 million actively filming within their borders. The US, meanwhile, saw a 35% decline, 251 down to 163, according to industry intelligence platform ProdPro. Quote, to the extent production has pulled back, the vast majority of that is happening to US-based projects, says ProdPro's chief executive, who notes that New York has proved more resilient, about 75% of 2022 production levels compared to about 60% in other states. Other data suggests that LA's share of the film and TV economy is shrinking, though it still remains at the front of the pack. The region posted a 27% share of employment in the sector in 2023, an indication of its portion of domestic production, compared with 35% just a year before, according to a recent report. Californians now account for less than 30% of the business's workers, down 10% from a decade ago, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Hollywood luminaries are taking notice, lobbying for more financial support while bemoaning sky-high filming costs. Speaking to The Hollywood Reporter at a fundraiser in September, Judd Apatow said that California will keep ceding productions to other states and countries if it doesn't implement a healthy tax rebate for our industry. It doesn't take a lot to try to figure that out. I mean, it's already happening. The momentum is there. The other states and the other countries want this business. They want to develop this as a way to generate a larger tax base. They're going to do it. They've been doing it. They're going to keep doing it. A production executive at a major studio stresses that, quote, pressure on budgets is at its highest level that it's been in 10 years. Amid this financial austerity, he says there's been a lot more scrutiny in considering alternative locations to ensure production tax credits are maximized. Quote, we want to be getting as much return as we can, the exec adds. It's rare that we do a show without some question about the incentive aspect. Not just in scripted, but all the way down to unscripted and documentaries now. And when he's talking about incentive aspect, he's talking about what kind of tax rebate are we getting so we can cut the cost of our production. Anything they make, they're looking at how can we do this for the cheapest expense. And what's the upshot? A production greenlight is tied to budgets increasingly taking every penny into account. On this front, California is behind the ball. The state's film commission offers a 20% base credit to feature films and TV series, and that's lower than most jurisdictions vying for Hollywood dollars, including New York, Mexico, and the UK, and has a $330 million cap on the program. It's the only major production hub that bars any portion of above-the-line costs, like salaries for actors, directors, and producers. So if you're a producer, if you're an actor, and that's going to be part of the budget, a director, you can't even get a percentage of that back as part of the incentive. But outside of Los Angeles, you can. The UK has leveraged that idiosyncrasy to lure big budget titles. Of late, it's become a premier destination for features. So has Canada, which has the added advantage of beneficial exchange rates. And they're talking about currency exchange rates. So if the Canadian dollar is down and you produce in Canada, that on top of the tax incentives makes it less expensive. So why would you not produce something there? And while LA has long retained a stranglehold in unscripted, its grip is quickly loosening. There was 1/3 the number of shoot days for reality TV last quarter compared to the highs of 2022. And it may not return to the region at the same levels as before the work stoppage. Other states and countries are making increasingly attractive bids for the likes of Selling Sunset, The Golden Bachelorette, and 90 Day Fiancé. In June, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker signed a bill expanding the state's tax credit program to include game, talk, and contest-based shows, among other types of reality TV. Georgia already allows the format to qualify. The studio production exec notes that margins for unscripted programming are typically much lower, which has pushed productions to look abroad. Quote, that's just the natural part of looking for the best deals on the planet, the executive says. The production downturn has forced some industry insiders to reconcile with the impact of the most recent WGA and SAG-AFTRA deals, which structure yearly minimum raises to match inflation. Preston Garrett, managing director of production company Rakish, is advocating for a moratorium on increases to crews and the temporary lowering of minimums until more work returns. Quote, what matters more, keeping pace with what's deemed to be fair inflation or sustainable crew rates that keep people working, Garrett asks. If we make the market more competitive, more work will come. There's like no leadership in this situation. Usually someone can stand up and say, hey, look, this is what we need to do to keep things working in this situation. There's nothing here that way. It's like headless chickens running around California. As the production aspect of the entertainment industry in Hollywood completely disappears. On Monday, Sony Pictures Entertainment CEO Tony Vinciquerra warned that the deals made with major labor unions are suppressing domestic production, Quote, the contract terms are forcing productions out of the US now. There's a very significant difference in California, which has been the hardest hit and just hasn't responded to what's going on in the world of incentives. The cost of doing business in California is so high that it's very difficult to price out a film. When he's saying price out a film, he's literally saying trying to estimate what the cost of the film would be to do it in that jurisdiction. So you can't even estimate what the cost is going to be if you decide to do the film in LA, because there are additional costs and regulations and upgrades and all kinds of expenses you can't even completely anticipate. And when you're doing budgeting for anything, if you have to overestimate to make sure you don't underestimate and then have to go back for more financing, it makes something that's more expensive appear even more expensive because you have to build in a buffer for it. In a statement in response to the Sony CEO, SAG-AFTRA's National Executive Director said, "The Sony CEO is peddling a false narrative. He's threatening offshoring American jobs in a cynical attempt to manipulate workers while masking the industry's own business failures." And of course, while it puts the SAG-AFTRA people in a bad position because they're the ones who did all these strikes, and it's kind of embarrassing for them that they helped to destroy the market for their labor, like in Los Angeles, where they actually live near and around. But just saying that the CEO of Sony and other entertainment executives are peddling false narratives, it's not going to help them. They're not going to get more work. These are the people they have to get work from. They're going to have to cooperate with them somehow. But there's really no leadership here. I don't see anyone stepping up and trying to figure out the problem. And as far as woke Hollywood goes, they're getting what they deserve. They deserve to be destroyed, but they really are actually getting destroyed. From a business standpoint, it's so much mismanagement and it's so absurd. I just never thought I would see something like this because usually people do care about keeping work in their community and developing their resources and have some kind of loyalty to each other that they want to work together, but not in this case. Other Hollywood vets lament that LA is simply no longer a film-friendly hub. It's not any one thing. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. Another example, the rising cost of shooting permits. Last year, Film LA rolled out film hikes on a slew of fees. While some of the increases were tied to inflation, others represented markups to roughly 8 to 17%. Among the service pricing changes were additional limitations imposed by the guidelines that have aggravated location budgets. A permit that used to accommodate up to 10 locations over 14 consecutive days now allows for only 5 locations over 7 days. So you're going to put people through incredible hoops just to do business here. Why would they do it unless they were absolutely forced to? And they're not forced to do it. Jason McCauley, a location manager for Joker 2, which was partially filmed in LA, says he's seeing permitting fees double in some cases. Quote, "It's not the deciding factor, but those costs on top of what it otherwise costs to film here becomes expensive. It's not just the permits, it's labor, fuel, parking." Actor and producer Luke Burnett says he's realized Los Angeles was in trouble when he saw the price tag for a permit to shoot for a single day. Quote, "The fact that it can cost thousands of dollars to shoot on a property you own. That's hard to justify if you can do it somewhere else," Barnett says. And from ScreenDaily.com, Hollywood strike impact far more severe for the U.S. than people realize, according to the Sony Pictures CEO. Vince Zachara said, "The length of the actors and writers strikes, as well as their renewed contract terms, have forced productions outside of the U.S. Quote, "We tried to talk to the unions about what we thought would happen," he said. "And now it's happening. It is pushing production out of the U.S. Attractive international tax incentives have lured productions outside the U.S. The cost of the crews are significantly less outside the U.S. In Australia, in England, in Eastern Europe, places like that. So there's a very significant difference." By comparison, California, quote, "just hasn't responded to what's going on in the world. The incentives and the cost of doing business in California is so high that it's very difficult to price out a film. There are a lot of TV productions going on in California, but not as many big budget films." The executive also noted that the next 18 to 24 months are going to be very chaotic for U.S. studios grappling with the decline of legacy cable channels, echoing similar remarks that he's made in the past month or so. Quote, "There will be a shakeout there," he said. "There's going to be mergers, consolidations, sales, or some bankruptcies potentially." He said Sony had sold off or closed most of its cable channels as part of a company restructuring, which began 6 years ago, which has provided the studio with a measure of stability. But we don't have to worry about getting rid of cable channels. All of our competitors do right now. They have all these cable networks that will not recover. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.